ahead and get started. Again, hi, thank you all for joining us here at Rustici Software for diving into LTI from the basics to deep linking. My name is Luke Weideman. I'm the Director of Engineering here at Rustici. I've been working here for a little over 7 years now and have been here since we first took on LTI as a standard and added support for it into our products. I'm excited to share more about the standard and how our products have integrated it. My co-host here is Ashton, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Ashton Garcia. I've been with Rustici for almost 3 years now. I'm an engineer on our engine team, and I'm here today because a lot of the work that I do ends up being in our LTI implementation and adding new LTI features to our releases.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashton. So before we dive into the LTI depths that we're about to wade into, I wanted to make sure that everyone in our audience knows who we are at Rustici. We've been involved in the e-learning business since 2002. We're passionate about learning standards and making it easy for content and platforms to connect. Our bread and butter has been SCORM, and we've been adding to our standards repertoire consistently through the years with support for AICC, XAPI, CMI5, and LTI, which is what you're here to learn about today. So let's dive into LTI and let's start just by kind of giving a basic outline of all the different areas we're going to explore today, just to help you better understand where we're going with today's LTI discussion. We'll start off in the shallow end at first with a basic overview of LTI and who it's for. We'll go into the deep end by getting into the more nitty-gritty details of LTI and compare it to SCORM in terms of what all the standards provides. From there, we'll really start diving into the depths by discussing the deep linking functionality in LTI and giving a short demo of what that looks like. We'll talk a little bit about how we test LTI functionality in our products, which products of ours are certified in LTI 1.3 by One EdTech, and highlight some of our most recent improvements and additions to LTI in our latest version of Rustici Engine. So with that roadmap in mind, let's go ahead and dive in and start getting into an overview of LTI. LTI stands for Learning Tools Interoperability, which really just means that it's a standard for helping learning tools communicate and work with each other. This learning standard was created by One EdTech, which was previously known as IMS Global. The purpose of the standard is to make it easy for trusted platforms and tools to share information between each other. As One EdTech puts it, its primary purpose is to seamlessly connect learning systems, a platform, with content provided by a third-party EdTech supplier, a tool. The biggest part of making that plug-and-play architecture become reality is establishing the authentication mechanisms and requirements that are needed for the two sides of the equation to establish trust between each other, and then seamlessly move data between each other. Once that trust is established, then content can be launched remotely by learners through their chosen platform. One thing you may have noticed is that I've used the words tool and platform a couple times now, so I want to clarify what those are. The platform is where the learners reside and interact with the content. The tool is where the content itself resides, and the tool shares the content with the platform. These terms are commonly used throughout LTI specs and instructions, so it's helpful to be familiar with them. One EdTech recently simplified this language, as prior to LTI 1.3 and LTI 1.1, a platform was referred to as a tool consumer, and a tool was referred to as a tool provider. And using tool in both of those terms made things confusing at times and difficult for folks to remember. So in LTI 1.3, One EdTech simplified that, and we now just have platform and tool, which is a little bit easier to remember which one's which. So who is LTI for? LTI has historically been found in the education realm, but most often in higher education. There are some pretty big players there that you may or may not have heard of before, like Blackboard, Canvas, D2L Brightspace, Moodle, Google Workspace LTI, and LinkedIn Learning. All of those have some form of LTI support within them. It's also moving in the direction of being the preferred standard for corporations that are looking to partner with higher ed institutions. Since many of these higher ed institutions are already familiar with many of the bigger platforms in the ed space, like Blackboard, Canvas, or Moodle, it makes sense for corporations to use a standard that they are also already familiar with in LTI. This partnership helps form a shared curriculum where higher ed learners can pre-skill with access to corporate training, corporate learners can reskill with higher ed content, and corporate learners can upskill utilizing higher ed programs. Tammy, our managing director here at Rustici, did a really interesting talk on the benefits of corporate and higher ed partnership that you might be interested in checking out in our webinar archives if you'd like to get further information around that. So you may have noticed by now that I've mentioned two different versions of LTI so far in this overview of LTI. There's LTI 1.1, which is the older version of LTI that was most commonly used. This version of LTI had an outdated authentication mechanism, but it was fairly simple and easy to use. This version can still be found out in the wild today, but it has been deprecated by OneEdTech in favor of LTI 1.3. It had several services that went alongside it. Some of those services are things like Basic Outcomes 1.0, Deep Linking 1.0, and the Names and Role Provisioning Service 1.0. LTI 1.3 is the new and improved LTI. It was released by OneEdTech back in 2019 and is seen in many major products today. In addition to core LTI 1.3, OneEdTech included add-on specifications, much like with LTI 1.1, that could be implemented as a part of LTI 1.3. Many of these additional specs also existed in the LTI 1.1 world, but with the introduction of LTI 1.3, OneEdTech gave that collection of specs an umbrella name of LTI Advantage. And we'll talk more about what exactly makes up the LTI Advantage suite in just a little bit here. But before we dig into that, let's talk about what's new with LTI 1.3. In the move from LTI 1.1 to 1.3, OneEdTech overhauled the authentication mechanism used by platforms and tools to determine if each other could be trusted. The OneEdTech teams spec'd out a OneEdTech security framework that's based on OAuth 2 and JSON Web Tokens to provide greater security of the data transmitted between the tool and the platform. This helps provide greater security of learner data and PII. You can see the details in the specification, and if you're interested in learning more, you can go to the OneEdTech website, and I think we might be providing a link to that in the chat as well. It included improved guidance for implementing the LTI Advantage suite. OneEdTech put together a fairly comprehensive guide for anyone that has LTI 1.1 implementations and needs to migrate those implementations to LTI 1.3. It was also designed to better support other OneEdTech standards, such as IMS Common Cartridge or Calibre Analytics and others. You can view all those standards at OneEdTech's website if you're interested in learning more about those. So you heard me mention LTI Advantage was a new part of LTI 1.3 and that it was a collection of specifications by OneEdTech. So let's look a little more in depth at what makes up this LTI Advantage suite. LTI Advantage is made up of 4 parts. To be certified in LTI 1.3, a product does not need to have implemented all of LTI Advantage. OneEdTech allows for certification of each individual part, and if certified in all parts, that makes up what's referred to as LTI Advantage. LTI 1.3 Core and the IMS Security Framework are the first part of LTI Advantage. This makes up the handshake and launch process that allows users of a platform to gain access to content within a tool. The assignment and grading service, also referred to as A&G, is for sharing gradebook information between the tool and the platform. In more simple terms, it's the service that allows the score that's being captured in the tool's content to make its way over to the platform where the learner is launching the content. Deep linking 2.0 is probably one of the most interesting parts of LTI Advantage, as it allows platform users to more easily add content from a tool into the platform. This is especially beneficial when the tool has a large amount of content that needs to be added to the platform and removes the need for passing around files with potentially hundreds of LTI resource links. With deep linking, the platform is able to communicate to the tool that a user is interested in adding content to the platform. The tool will then expose a UI that allows the user to find the content that they're interested in, select it, and send it over to the platform. The platform then ingests that info and adds the chosen content for learners to be able to then access. This makes life way easier for content creators, instructors, or admins, or whoever is creating learning paths or course content inside a platform. And we'll look at this a little bit more in depth when Ashton shares a little bit more about deep linking and also gives us a demo of that. Lastly, there's the names and roles provisioning service, and that is one of the LTI Advantage services that Rustici products do not support. This service allows tools and platforms to share rosters and other user information more easily, and gives insight into who's enrolled in a tool and who has not yet accessed a tool. So this chart here shows the process or steps of the LTI 1.3 core launch, along with the assignments and grades service in a typical Rustici product. And so we have this here to kind of outline each of the steps in that process and kind of highlight where each of these LTI Advantage services might come into play. So you'll see that the first step is to have the platform and tool exchange information, which is how they will know that the other is a trusted entity to communicate with. And so on the platform side, the platform has a specific set of information that's laid out by the OneEd tech spec in terms of what the tool needs to know about who the platform is. And so there are a couple of different URIs for being able to help set up secure access and things like that. And then there are a couple of key pieces of information that help the tool recognize who the platform is. And so all that information gets exposed in the platform and then needs to be transferred over into the tool. The tool itself also exposes certain key pieces of information that the platform needs put into it in order for both of them to be able to talk back and forth appropriately. And it's a couple of different URIs that tell the platform this is how you should launch into the tool. And so once those pieces of information are exchanged, then the tool and the platform will know how to be able to talk to each other and know that each of them are trusted entities that they can talk with. The second step is the tool providing a launch URL, typically referred to as an LTI resource link. This tells the platform how to launch the desired content within the tool or the desired area within the tool for learners or instructors or whoever it is that's accessing the tool to get into. The third step is to import the resource link into the platform itself. So the tool provides that LTI resource link, then the platform needs to actually put that LTI resource link somewhere in the platform itself. Usually the platform provides a place to include this resource link so that it can be launched by a learner. It's a thing that I'd like to point out here is that deep linking significantly simplifies steps 2 and 3. Because as you can imagine, getting individual links out of a tool could be very resource intensive and time consuming if you've got hundreds of different links within the tool that you want to be able to provide your learners access to. And then having to gather up all those links in the tool and then put each of those links individually into the platform sounds very tedious. Deep linking simplifies all that and makes all that process easy to do with just a couple of simple steps. For step 4, the learner needs to be assigned to the course or activity, or however the platform provides the learner access to the resource link. Step 5 is the actual launch of that LTI resource link by the learner within the platform. The learner is then taken into the tool and is able to access the content provided by the tool and go through it. And then finally, in step 6, we see our assignments and grading service kick in here. And the tool provides the score and completion status back to the platform so that the platform can store it in its gradebook. And that's sort of the anatomy of a typical LTI launch in greater detail there. The deep linking process, as I mentioned, also follows some of the same steps there that we just talked about. There are a couple of minor differences, but in terms of the security exchange and all the other steps there are pretty similar. If you have any questions about this LTI launch flow, definitely feel free to throw those in the chat. We'll be happy to take a look at those and either answer them in the chat or try to answer them at the end of this presentation here. So we've gotten a pretty good understanding now of what LTI is at this point, but we haven't really talked too much about the why of LTI. So let's take a look at why you might want to use LTI as a standard. First of all, as I've mentioned a couple times now, it saves time. Without the standardization of LTI, each tool and platform would need unique integrations. And if you have several tools that your platform uses and connects with, that could be quite a large chunk of development time and cost each time you need to integrate with a new tool or each time a tool's integration paths change. And so over time with maintenance and things like that, that eats up a lot of development time. So having that standardization there that One Ed Tech has put in place makes it much easier for these tools and platforms to consistently connect and communicate with each other and share information. It also provides secure access for instructors and learners as they move seamlessly between the platform and various learning tools that the platform's connected to. Security has become more and more important in our world, and One Ed Tech was intentional about using more modern security methods to protect the data that's shared back and forth between the platform and the tool. It also makes it easier to integrate content from the tool into the platform for users who are developing courses. Through the use of deep linking, users can quickly find the desired content inside the tool and add it into the course that they are creating without the need for having to switch contexts or leave the platform. They can do all this just in the platform and not have to worry about figuring out which tool it is that they want to go navigate to that tool, go figure out where the things are that they want in that tool, gather those resource links, and come back. Everything is just done in the platform, and it makes that process a whole lot easier. It also significantly reduces teacher burden for both setup of their courses, if they're doing that, and they can do that through the use of deep linking as well. It also makes keeping track of student scores easy through the assignments and grade service, as that allows the tool to provide the student scores and completion information back to the platform. And so that way those teachers can have all that stored just over in the platform itself that they're using. And that way they don't have to go out to those tools and be able to see, all right, how did this student do over here in this particular tool? And if they're using another tool, go to that tool and figure out, all right, how did this student do on this particular assignment in this tool? All that information just gets stored back in the platform. So it's all stored in one place. As you might remember from the beginning of our discussion, I mentioned that SCORM was sort of Rustici's bread and butter. So I'd like to do a quick comparison between the two to help highlight some of the differences between SCORM and LTI. They might seem to somewhat do similar things in regards to providing ways to share content with learning platforms and allowing learners to access them, but there are some pretty significant differences between the two that you may have noticed, especially if you're familiar with SCORM. First of all, SCORM is focused on launching training content and tracking user interactions. Tracking user interactions, I think, is particularly important here, as the SCORM data model allows for more information and seeing learner progress and status than what LTI provides. LTI is more focused on connecting learning systems in a standardized way, so not just focused on the content itself like SCORM, and doesn't provide the level of interaction tracking that SCORM has. The learner tracking info that's received comes through the assignments and grade service and provides score and completion only. SCORM also has the concept of physical packages, which are bundled zip files or proxy packages that allow users to get the content into their chosen platform. On the LTI side of things, that content is remotely hosted by the tool, and the tool provides a way to access that content, typically with LTI resource links, rather than sharing packages like SCORM does. The content is uploaded directly into the LMS for SCORM, typically through the use of physical files that contain the learning content, unless you're using a proxy or dispatch package. And it is then played within the LMS, and then all data communication happens through the browser for learners. Over on the LTI side, the content plays directly out of the tool, so it's done remotely. The communication of learner score or progress does not happen in the browser like it does for SCORM, but it actually happens server to server. SCORM is governed by the ADL, which is part of the federal government, whereas LTI is governed by One Ed Tech, which is a nonprofit organization. And then lastly, SCORM is typically found in corporate organizations and government agencies, while LTI has historically been used in academia and higher education settings. So that's a whole lot of information that I've given about LTI, its background, its usage. So I think it's time to get into some more practical application of some of these things. For that, I'm going to hand things over to Ashton, who's going to take us on a deep linking dive and demo, in addition to sharing some interesting LTI info with you. So, Ashton, how about you take it from here and let us know more about deep linking and what it looks like?
All right, thanks, Luke. So as Luke said, I'd like to start by talking a little bit more about deep linking. This is a feature we've paid some special attention to in our latest release of Engine. Deep linking at its core is a LTI specification that allows a platform to more easily integrate content gathered from an external tool. So whereas you would have to import individual resource links or set up an LTI launch for every course using resource link requests, or do some kind of custom integration with the tool. Now using deep linking, you can select a whole set of content, import it all so that those links can then be later launched by students or learners, and it just streamlines the process a lot more. This is going to make things a lot easier for instructional technology staff, educational instructors to set up content delivery for their students and learners. Using deep linking, we can share a broad range of content types. Initially, on Engine 24, we're only supporting LTI resource links. Okay, so deep linking is an extension of the LTI toolbox. As I mentioned before, it really streamlines setting up tool links. It allows you to set up a whole set of tool links that could be launched at a later time, rather than having to do an LTI launch for every course. It enables external tools to appear in the same way that your internal tools do. So for a learner launching a deep linked course, they're going to feel like they're still on your platform. They're not going to feel like they've been navigated away onto someone else's product. They're going to feel like they're still in your setting and in your platform. And then, of course, it eliminates the need for a custom integration. So LTI messages handle all the security and authorization for you, handles the integration with the tool, and you don't have to worry about adding any kind of custom integration. So a little deep dive into the features. This is a new workflow for adding third-party content. So as before, you might have to set up an LTI launch for each individual course. Now you'll be able to import hundreds of courses at once if that's what you want to do, and those courses can be later launched directly into an LTI tool. This is implemented as another message type, which is similar to a launch message. So similar to the LTI link request, which would launch into a course, the deep linking request sort of launches you to an LTI tool's content selection page. Supported content types are controlled by the platform. So as I mentioned before, Engine is supporting LTI resource links, where a tool might provide different types of content. We're not going to allow you to import something that you're not able to handle. LTI links can be pre-configured with custom parameters by the tool. So each content item that gets imported can have a custom parameter associated with it, and this will be forwarded onto the platform. And then all transactions are secured by latest LTI methods. So again, we're using that IMS security framework in the LTI spec. You don't have to worry about securing the messages. It's all using latest LTI methods. All right,
so I'm going to switch things over to let Ashton show us this demo. So while Ashton's getting set up, it looks like we've had quite a few questions come in the chat, which has been great. Feel free to continue adding questions about things that either Ashton and I have talked about so far, and we'll definitely get to those at the end of the presentation.
All right, so I'd like to go ahead and demonstrate LTI deep linking, and I'm going to be importing courses from a tool to a platform. So what you're seeing here is Rustici's content controller, and I'm going to be using this as our LTI tool. You can see here I'm on my content controller user account, 000 Ashton testing. I've preloaded some course content on here, courses on the tool. And then at the top, if we go to the Advanced tab, there's a section on the left here for LTI. And this is where we'll put in our tool configuration. So here at the top, there's some configuration for LTI 1.1. I'm going to focus on the LTI 1.3. This first block for platform configuration is information we're going to need to get from the LTI platform. And this block here at the bottom, the LTI tool details, is information we're going to need to share with the LTI platform. So as you can see, I've already put in this configuration, but I'm going to go through it with you just so you can kind of see what I've done. So for my LTI platform, I'm going to be using the Rustici Engine API, and I'm only using Engine as an API. You would probably have Engine integrated into your learning management system or maybe another Rustici product. But for today's demo, I'm just using the Engine API. So what you're looking at on this screen is Postman. If you're not familiar with Postman, it's just a tool that allows us to build and send HTTP requests. So I'm going to use that to help me interact with the Engine API by itself. So the first step here is I'm going to send this put request to create a tenant on Engine. This is going to be called, or I've named it platform tenant. And this is just a way to kind of contain our configuration for LTI. The next step, there are a few settings that you'll need to configure just to be able to use Engine as an LTI platform. These are mostly base URLs so that Engine can build its LTI endpoints. And of course, information on how to configure these can be found in our documentation. So the next step is to create a content connector. So I'm going to do a post to our content connectors endpoint. And the information that I'm going to include here is that information that we need to get from the LTI tool. And creating this content connector just allows Engine to be used as an LTI platform. So that's this information here under the LTI tool details back on Content Controller. We're going to need either a public key or a URL to your JSON Web Key Set. In this case, I've used the JSON Web Key Set URL. Going to need an OpenID Connect login initiations endpoint URL, at least one redirect URI. And then if your LTI tool provides a content selection URL or a separate redirect for the deep linking tool, you can include that here as the tool deep linking URL. Every LTI tool should provide you with at least this information. So back in Postman here, I've set up the tool JWKS URL. Here's the OpenID Connect login initiations endpoint, the redirect URI, and the deep linking URL from Content Controller. So after that, I've sent a GET request to our Content Connectors endpoint. And what this is going to return is that platform information that we need to share with the tool. So go back over to Content Controller. I've shared with it the client ID, a deployment ID, which on the platform is the connector ID, our JSON Web Key Set URL, the platform's issuer identifier, our OIDC authorizations endpoint, and an access token endpoint. So now at this point, the Engine platform and Content Controller are set up to send LTI messages back and forth. And so here comes kind of the magic of deep linking. This is a new request in Engine 24 to Content Connectors endpoint. And the bit of custom information here is I've added if I go back to this page, the Content Connector ID, which is also the deployment ID for the tool. I've added that right in here to the path of the request. And then as a header, I have our platform tenant tenant for the Engine platform. And when I send this request, it's going to return this big URL. Now, the reason you're seeing this is, again, because I'm just using Engine as an API by itself. In your LMS or another Rustici product, likely this URL would be behind just a button that someone can click. You probably wouldn't be dealing with this URL, but I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this into a browser. And where this link will take us, if your user kind of clicks on their button or enters this link, it should take us to the tools content selector page. All right, so now you'd be navigating away from your platform and, sorry, it would still appear that you're on your platform, but now we've navigated to the tools content selector page. So this is coming from Content Controller. And here's that set of courses that I showed you earlier that I had preloaded. And I can go ahead and select whatever content I want to import. So I'll choose 4 courses and hit the continue button. Now, I've intentionally left this page this way because I wanted to show you there is a new configuration setting called redirect on deep link exit URL. And you'll be able to configure that to whatever value you want. If you don't configure it, you'll see this page. It'll be a reminder to you. But you can set this to redirect your user to a course list or platform homepage, wherever you want them to go after they complete the deep linking process. So what you're seeing here is kind of a skeleton web UI that we use to interact with the Engine API. So I'm looking here back at Engine as a platform now, and I'm under this courses tab to hopefully see the courses we've just imported. So I'll go to that platform tenant that I created earlier. And now here's the set of courses that I imported. These all represent LTI resource links and can be launched at any time. They can be launched and relaunched by a student later. And those launches will take the student to the course in the tool. And we've prefixed them with this LTI deep link, so you can kind of tell where they came from. I'm not going to launch a course right now, but I just wanted to show you this is kind of the power of deep linking. I imported 4 courses. You could import 200 courses, and you don't have to go through and set up each course as an LTI launch. They're just all here, ready to go, ready to be launched. So that's it for the demo. I just want to talk briefly about some of the tools that we use to test our LTI implementation. One of the main ones is OneEdTech's global testing tool. This is a testing system created by OneEdTech themselves. It allows users to create test platforms and interact with the tool and kind of inspect the LTI messages going back and forth. The OneEdTech test tool will kind of flag you if you've missed a required claim or anything like that. And it just kind of ensures that your implementation is following the spec as designed by OneEdTech. Another tool we use is called Saltire. It's an open source LTI testing system, and it works kind of similar to the OneEdTech test tool, where it allows you to inspect the LTI messages going back and forth and kind of see the claims that you're sending back and forth. We also do testing with some other popular products like Moodle and Canvas, just to ensure that our implementation is behaving with their implementation the way we expect it to. Okay, and on this slide, I'm going to show you some of the Rustici products that have been certified through OneEdTech's LTI certification program. You can see on the platform side, we have just Rustici Engine and SCORM Cloud. And on the tool side, we have SCORM Cloud Dispatch, Content Controller, Rustici Dispatch, and Rustici Engine Dispatch. Okay, so Engine 24.1 release. We've included a number of LTI features. to improve our LTI 1.3 support. The first of which I'm going to talk about is the LTI deep linking import for Engine as a platform. This is the demo I just went through. It allows you to import multiple content items from LTI tools into Engine that can be launched at a later time. Another feature we added is support for LTI's OpenID Connect login with LTI client-side post messages, both for Engine as a platform and as a tool. I know that's a mouthful. The client-side post message is another LTI specification, and the reason for this is as browsers begin to phase out third-party cookies, LTI needed a way to maintain state between platform and a tool without storing that information in browser cookies. So now that gets sent in post messages, and you can turn that on. And again, information on how to configure that is available in the Rustici documentation. Another thing we added is that Engine's API can create valid LTI JSON web tokens with arbitrary claims. So the LTI spec defines a number of claims for LTI messages. If there's something that you'd like to include as a custom claim that's not already predefined, that can now be added to your LTI messages. If any of these features sound interesting to you, something that you'd like to get a hold of, we would encourage you to get in contact with our support team to start a conversation about upgrading to Engine 24. Okay, and that concludes the things that I wanted to talk about.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashton, for that. Especially thank you for that demo of deep linking. That was definitely very cool to see in action. We've had quite a few questions come through in the chat. So we'd like to go ahead and take some time to address some of those and see if we can answer those as best we can. The first question that I see here is, can this include e-commerce? This was referring specifically, I think, to the communication protocol slide that I was going through. And I think for the e-commerce side, that would typically be on the platform or the LMS side, not necessarily part of the LTI standard. So if you wanted to, have your LTI resource links guarded via e-commerce and have a paywall around that, that would be something that I would imagine you would just build on the platform side of things. There's not anything specific to e-commerce within the LTI standard itself. The LTI standard is more about making sure that the platform and the tool can connect to each other. If you're thinking on the tool side of things, and if the tool is the e-commerce site, again, I think that whatever ends up, however the platform launches into your tool, you could then provide the e-commerce system for however that might work. I think that e-commerce idea is outside of the LTI standard itself. Hopefully that answers your question. I see another good question here. If I have my own LMS using XAPI, does it make sense to have or use LTI yet? And I think in terms of that, a lot of that depends on, if you're going to be selling your product to the K through 12 or higher education region. If that's your market, that is that particular set of folks are going to be more interested in having LTI connections in order to be able to access those XAPI-based courses that you have. And so if there is interest in that, then it would certainly make sense to pursue that and have that LTI connection to make it easy for those folks to be able to access the content on your platform. We've got another question here. What measures are being taken to encourage and incentivize commercial vendors, specifically LMS vendors, to adopt LTI as a feature? And I think in terms of that, like one ed tech has been very diligent in terms of providing documentation around how things work and what their expectations are for LTI. Over at Rustici, we've we've done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of LTI and the standard sides of things to make it easier to be able to get LTI into your products. As Ashton sort of highlighted on the certifications slide that he showed there, most of our products are LTI certified either from the platform side or from the tool side. To get your content shared or allow other content to be shared with your platform, depending upon which of our products it is that you're using. Another question is it possible to enable course level use of an LTI product without a key? And if so, what are the risks to this approach? And I think if I understand this question correctly, you might be asking, is it possible for a platform to be able to access content within a tool without having to do the security exchange or the security handshake that LTI enforces? And the answer to that is no. LTI, the way that the security framework is set up within the standard is so that both the tool and the platform have to know about each other. And so they have to have this trusted information to be able to perform the handshake before either of them can connect to each other or exchange data. So in terms of LTI itself, the answer to that is no. In terms of Rustici products, we do have ways to be able to share that course level type of information without necessarily all of the key and security exchange things. And if you'd like to learn more about how you could do that, certainly reach out to us. I see another question. Do you have examples that can be used to test in an LTI supported LMS? And I'm going to go ahead and let Ashton answer that question.
Sorry, Luke, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, do you have examples that can be used to test in an LTI supported LMS? And I think that that's going to relate largely to the how do we test LTI slide and the various testing tools that exist out there today.
Yeah, so I guess for examples of testing, I had mentioned the OneEdTech's test tool. You can set up your LMS as an LTI platform and then configure that LTI test tool as your LTI tool, and that'll show you kind of what you can expect to happen when you link to a tool without actually integrating with a live running tool. SoftIR is another example of that, free open source. You can set up your platform, interact with SoftIR and kind of view the LTI messages going back and forth and kind of get an example of what you can expect to see from a live running tool. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, awesome, Ashton. Thanks for that. And I see Alicia shared those links in the chat there for those testing tools. So definitely feel free to take a look at those. As Ashton mentioned, both those testing tools can simulate whichever side of the equation you might need for LTI. So if you're a platform and you need a tool to test against, they can simulate being a tool. If you're a tool and you need a platform to test against, they can simulate being a platform. Another question that came in is, do you have a list of LTI supported LMS systems? And I think I saw Alicia share in the chat a link to OneEdTech's official list of products and applications that are LTI certified. So you can definitely utilize that as a resource to find platforms or tools that are OneEdTech certified in LTI 1.3. These are lots of good questions. So thank you all for throwing these in there. The next one that I see here is, maybe I missed this, but if you want to create a connection between an LMS and an external platform with trainings, can you use LTI only if both platforms support LTI, or what are the criteria? And yes, both sides of the equation there need to have LTI support. So if you're on the platform side, you will need to have LTI platform support to be able to then launch into a tool. If you're on the tool side, you need to have LTI tool support in order to be able to handle a launch from a platform. And so in order for that to work, both sides of the equation there, both platform and tool, need to be certified or LTI compliant, I should say. We got another question about SCORM Cloud. Are you going to address how this works with SCORM Cloud users? And I think Alicia answered that question in the chat somewhat, but I'll go ahead and say a little bit about that here as well. As Ashton pointed out, SCORM Cloud is LTI certified, both as a platform and as a tool. So you can actually use SCORM Cloud either way. So if you want to connect your SCORM Cloud account to other LTI tools, you can do that. If you want to use SCORM Cloud as a tool and connect it to other platforms, you can also do that as well. And I believe we have some knowledge base articles out there around how to be able to do that in LTI 1.3 as well. Will deep linking allow for completion records to be sent back to the LMS? I'm also going to throw this one over to Ashton to answer.
Yes. So when you import a set of courses or a single course using deep linking, you're actually importing those LTI resource links. So when you go and launch those courses, it's going to behave as a normal LTI resource link request, and it will be able to send completion and grades back as if you were just doing a normal LTI launch.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashton. The next question that I see is, do these configurations need to be done on each piece of content? And I believe that's referring to some of the initial setup that Ashton was showing during the demo. So the initial set of configurations, the initial set of links and information that Ashton was having the platform and the tools share, that doesn't need to be done for each piece of individual content. That is the initial setup to make sure that the platform and tool know that they're both trusted entities and will be able to communicate with each other. Once you've set those up, then you don't need to do it again for any other further communications around that tool and that platform. If you are looking to add an additional tool to your platform, then yes, you would end up needing to set up those communications again because the platform and the tool information will end up being a little bit different since it'll be a new tool. And so you'll have to share that information with the new tool to make sure the new tool knows how to talk to your platform. Another question we have is Ashton's demo from an IT administrator perspective. And I think the way that I would answer that is the initial part of it would be that initial setup of the security info exchange would likely be done by the LMS administrator or the tool administrator. But then once he got into the deep linking section of that, where he's actually performing the deep linking that could be done, while that could be performed by an IT administrator, you also could have an instructor do that, or an instructional designer that's setting up a course on a platform could also do that and perform that deep linking process. So that deep linking part that Ashton was demoing is more for a wider audience to make it much simpler to be able to get the tool resource links into your platform. Another good question about deep linking. With deep linking, we can't just redirect to a specific resource, only to a batch. And I'm going to try and address this question as best I can. I think that this is asking if during the deep linking process, does it have to be a batch of links that could be sent? No, you can choose individual resources, and it could just be one, and that would be fine. It doesn't have to be a batch of resources that are being done at deep linking time. There's actually some the way that deep linking works and works with certain platforms, sometimes some platforms will only allow an individual resource to be chosen instead of a whole batch of resources being chosen, because that's how the platform chooses to handle it. So the platform is able to make some decisions around that as well. All right, we are almost there. Again, thank you all for these questions. These have been really good questions. I'm glad everyone's been able to participate so far in this. Is course selection, as Ashton showed, typically done in an external tab window as shown here, or might it be done in an embedded iframe type UI in the platform? And for that question, I would say ultimately that's up to the platform to decide how it wants to handle that. I've seen platforms where it does do that in an embedded iframe, and I've seen platforms where it pops out a window and then you make those selections there and then it takes you back. So that ultimately is up to the platform to decide how it wants to handle that deep linking interaction.
Yeah, so just to add,
yeah, go ahead, Ashton.
I had mentioned the deep linking requests message kind of acts as a normal launch. So however your platform is set up to do a normal course launch is kind of how you're going to see that content selector page. So if you're set up to launch courses in an iframe, the content selector is going to show up in an iframe as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Ashton. The next question I see here is it possible to use deep linking to navigate to a specific section within a course rather than just linking to other courses? Deep linking isn't going to actually take you into the course itself. Deep linking is more specifically about getting the LTI resource links from the tool into the platform, so that then the learner can launch those particular resource links and then be taken into the content or wherever it is that the tool desires to take that particular learner within the tool itself. So if there was a specific sections or things that needed to be navigated into, that could potentially be set up on the tool side, depending upon how you create your tool. And oh wow, I think we finally made it to the last question here that I see right now, and that's if you're using multiple platforms. So for example, a Canvas instance and a Moodle instance, can one configuration on the tool side be used to set that tool up with each individual platform? And the answer to that is no, you can't use just one configuration on the tool side. Because there is an exchange of information between both the platform and the tool, so that the tool knows who it's talking to. That platform is going to provide specific information to the tool to say, hey, I'm this particular trusted platform. You need this information about me to know who I am. And so you're going to have two different configuration instances around what that looks like. So it would not be just one thing together that would handle that. So hopefully that answers that question as well. Well, thank you all so much for your participation. I'm overwhelmed with how many questions came in, and I think it's great. I'm excited that both Ashton and I were able to get to all those and answer all those. We're really glad that you joined us today and dove into the exciting world of LTI with us. We hope you learned something new from today's presentation. And if you have any further questions around anything that we talked about in the presentation, or want to further inquire about questions that I answered or anything like that, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you all so much for your time, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.